The Celtics won last night. My perspective on this game is going to be different, I believe, than anybody. I haven't truly listened to a bunch of the palaver that's taken place today, but I watched some last night. I listened some today, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be different than others. First, here's Ime Udoka on the difference and how his team, the Celtics, played offensively last night.
Offensively, it was really to keep our composure and not get sped up. I felt last game we weren't our best at attacking the rim and finding our outlets, and our spacing was much better tonight. Guys being patient and finding the driving lanes, and then obviously getting to the basket, the second chance points and offensive rebounds were big for us.
So how it was described during the game was accurate, but it wasn't necessarily as in-depth as how I'll kind of try and get into it here, okay? So it's pretty obvious that the Golden State Warriors are small inside, right? Like they don't play that big a lineup, and even their big guys aren't huge big guys, right? They don't have a Robert Williams. They don't have a true rim protector. They also don't take a ton of charges at the rim. These are things that they don't do. But what the Celtics were doing was not just driving the basketball where the Warriors didn't have big guys, was the actions that they ran. Right? Golden State does switch and rotate, so they were attacking whoever the biggest guy on the floor was generally off the dribble. Okay, so that has three different effects. One, it gives you an advantage in quickness against the big guy. Two, this is the most important thing. If you only have one big guy and he's defending the ball, guess what he can't be doing? Defending the rim. And three, once it became obvious that this is what they were doing, Golden State was trying to collapse and help out, and that's when they were getting kickouts and some open jump shots. I thought Draymond Green was not particularly good last night. The story to the game for me is the third quarter, which still statistically was dominated by the Golden State Warriors. They still came from double digits down to have a 2-point lead in that quarter. Okay, but it could, for the Celtics, it could have been worse. For the Warriors, it could have been better. That's it. For the Celtics, it could have been worse. For the Warriors, it could have been better. And Draymond's a big reason why. He missed a layup. He had two really bad turnovers when they're in transition. He forced passes. There was some non-box outs. There's just some times in which Robert Williams' athleticism, he just jumped over him. There's nothing he could do. But there was some missed opportunities there where they left meat on the bone. And so instead of getting it to where it's a 2-point lead and then the Celtics hit a couple shots and I think they went on up 2 at the end of the quarter, still a 10-point difference in score in the quarters, they should have had a 10-point lead, which would have given them the space needed for when they rested Steph, when they went to their bench early in the fourth quarter, when sometimes they struggle, especially when Poole's not hitting his shots. Does that make sense? So what ends up, it looks like a 16-point game. If you look at the first two quarters, if you look at the fourth quarter, you're like, game wasn't terribly close. But the truth is that this is kind of how the Warriors, they didn't want to get down as much as they got down. That's part of it, right? End of the first half, they left some meat out there on the bone as well. They missed a bunch of easy shots, bunch of layups. Right? And where the Celtics gave up some points in transition, for the most part, they were much better than the Warriors. But that third quarter, though they won the quarter, they didn't win it by enough. And I think more of that was their own undoing. Here's Draymond with an exchange with a reporter.
Draymond, I'm not saying it's why you struggled tonight by any means, but I found listening to your podcast recaps the last couple of games pretty interesting. Are you conscious at all of what you're saying about the X's and O's, the game plans, the adjustments could be making their way back to Boston staffers and influencing their decision-making at all?
I don't say much different on the podcast than I say to you right here. So, nah. What's the X's and O's that I said on the podcast? You all right?
Yeah, actually, the only real thing I noticed that really stood out, you talked about how to cover White, Smart, and Horford differently between games 1 and 2. That was really only...
Oh, yeah, that was just contesting shots. If that's X's and O's, then you reaching for something. It's all good, though. Keep going. reaching heavy. The only thing, you find that they are taking X's and O's away from your podcast. Well, the only thing you said is White, Smart, and Horford.
I'm not trying to blow it up.
I mean, you went for it, but hey, respect. Appreciate the podcast promo you just gave me, though. The Draymond Green Show. Next time, just mention it that way.
You got it.
It's the GOTTLIEB Show here on Fox Sports Radio. Here's Draymond on his podcast. Take a listen.
I think for me, I just let too much noise get into my head about all the other stuff. And so in turn, I let that drag my intensity level down. I let it, I'm going into the game like, all right, I'm not going to say this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get a referees a chance to call a tech and blah, 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 blah. And I did the exact opposite of what I said I was going to do or what I needed to do. I did the exact opposite. I actually did what most people think I should do. And that just doesn't work for me. That's not who I am. So ultimately, I have gotten to this position by simply being me.
First of all, I love that idea. I did a podcast with a young journalist who's in Miami earlier today, and he asked, he's like, how do you separate yourself? And what I have decided in my career and my life is, if I'm just me, every human being is unique unto themselves. So I'm automatically going to be a unique voice if it's my real authentic voice. I don't have to get into character and then go like, oh, in character, this is what I think. Out in character, not what I think. And I think kind of the secret to life is, now look, if you got to be a kind of good person, right? And you got to be a well-aligned person. But the secret to life is finding something where you can be comfortable being yourself. It's the same thing in relationships as well, right? You're going to be the best you if you can be the most authentic version of yourself, right? So I love that from Draymond. I heard this. This is Isiah Thomas on TV talking about Draymond Green.
The NBA Finals, and when you're playing for a championship, it really is about your mental toughness and your mental focus and being able to totally 100% concentrate on your opponent, shutting him down, understanding their offensive and defensive schemes. And anytime you lose that focus or that concentration, and you're talking about Cedric Maxwell, and you're talking about podcast, and you're talking about the fans.
Don't talk about X and O's, though.
Then you have lost, you have really lost your concentration and your focus. And where does that show up? That show up in the box score in a game like tonight where you play 34 minutes, you have 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 points. Draymond Green does that in a grade school game, not in the NBA Finals. So when you talk about focus, this is what the NBA Finals is about. And right now, he has lost focus in terms of concentrating on beating the opponent.
I'm just going to tell you, I don't know what happened to many of these guys that are broadcasters like Isiah Thomas, guys that are like Kendrick Perkins. But let's just be honest. When you go home, okay, from playing a basketball game, a high-level basketball game, and I don't know if this happens in an adult league game. I don't know if it happened to you when you're a kid. But every high-level athlete that I know, especially when they played a lot, when you go home, you're seeing it over and over in your head anyway. Right? You're seeing it over and over in your head anyway. Whether you watch film or you talk film or you talk through it with an assistant coach or with a friend or with your agent or with your boys or whatever, you're seeing that go through. So you're being completely disingenuous if you're Isiah Thomas. And this is the flaw to these style of broadcasts. Nobody will push back on Isiah like, hey, Isiah, what did you do when you're playing against the Lakers in the NBA Finals and you get done? I think Ramos talked about it yesterday. He had that incredible game 6, I want to say, at the old Forum where he had 37 on one leg. Okay, so when you got done, what'd you do? You went and got ice and you got treatment. You sat in your room. Did you watch the game again? Did you talk to anybody about the game? Did you sit around? Did you lock yourself in a room? Did you not? Of course you did. So Draymond Green talking through what's going on for 20, 30 minutes or even an hour, That doesn't take away from your mental preparation. Like, we're embarrassing ourselves as former athletes turned broadcasters because we know that's not true, right? Like, there's a million other things he could be doing. Michael Jordan would go out and play 36 holes of golf, and then he'd come in and give it to Isiah Thomas, and they wouldn't shake hands. Remember that? And the same idiots, okay, were critical of Michael Jordan, and then he come in and he's like, I'm Michael Jordan. I remember he dropped a double nickel in the Garden, and he's like, yeah, I actually played 2.5 rounds of golf today. I don't care. All that matters is if you play well or if you don't play well. And if you're not playing well, progressively worse, okay, like James Harden played poorly in his first NBA Finals with Oklahoma City Thunder. Well, the problem was he kept going. He's in Miami, he kept going out. They're like, dude, you got to stop going out. He didn't, had no energy, had no juice. They felt like he left all his energy on the stripper table, right? On the stripper pole. We're talking about a podcast. This is, I feel like Allen Iverson, we're talking about practice, man. We're talking about a podcast, not a game, not a practice. We're talking about podcast where you're talking ball. He's not doing it on let me do a recap on the Kardashians' new season. Or This Is Us. This Is Us concluded. Let me do a recap of that. He's talking about a series that he's already thinking about. Of all of the things said by the media, this to me rises to the most embarrassing because the people who are articulating these thoughts and feelings are former athletes and know that it's bullcrap. It's completely bullcrap. And this is, it just becomes laughable. Are you mad because you don't have a podcast? Are you mad because the things he says? By the way, Draymond Green said yesterday, I played terrible. Okay. And Isiah going through his stats, like, Isiah, like, again, completely disingenuous. Give me all the stats for Draymond Green over the last 3 or 4 years. He hasn't been statistically dominant really ever in his career. And when you want to go back to the rebounding and like part of it is Boston's game plan, making him score. Part of it is their lineups have changed. They play Looney now more. So they have a true 5-man. But none of that is actual basketball analysis. Instead, we get caught up in this crap, which is, oh my God, Draymond Green has a podcast where he talks about basketball. To me, you lose every ounce of credibility when you say things that you know are categorically false, especially when you have been an athlete, you have been in those shoes, you have been in those meetings, you have had the same opportunities yourself, and without even asking questions. Like, look, you don't think Zeke could call up Draymond or text him like, hey, man, how do you do this? The first game, by the way, was what? Sunday? The last game was Sunday. The next game is Wednesday, right? The last game was Sunday. This game was yesterday, right? So you flew in on Monday. You have until Wednesday. How long is the podcast? Mine go way too long, I know. They're supposed to be like 20 to 30 minutes. All right, so we'll say it's an hour. So of the 3 days of prep, we have a problem with a 1 hour recording of a podcast of his thoughts of basketball. I want you to actually think. This is what my job of my show is. I want you to actually think about what people are saying. Just stop and think about it for a second. Like, oh, yeah, that's kind of bull. Yeah, it's not kind of. It is. Made worse because you have a Hall of Famer, an all-star. Is he 75 greatest of all time? Isiah Thomas? I would assume he is. Saying something which is categorically false, and he knows from personal experience how much time you have on your hands and how talking about basketball into a microphone in the comfort of your own home or hotel room is, without any question, the least reprehensible action that an NBA player can have. Maybe it just makes him mad that he couldn't beat Michael Jordan anymore and Jordan was off playing golf the day of games. Not sure.